This might sound arrogant, and if it is, it is. We're Michigan.
I'm telling them it's not over. It's just starting. It's not over. It'll never be over here.
Hello, welcome, Better Rivals, Ted and Tom, for what I just completed a fantastic weekend from my perspective. The Wolverines bounced back from that dastardly loss to Michigan State. They take the bye week, they bounce back and knock off Purdue 36-14, while at the same time, Nebraska was spanking the Sparties 24-3. Lots to talk about this week. Obviously, Ted, you had to be disappointed with your alma mater, the performance. The offense just kind of went in the tank.
I'll tell you what concerned me from the get-go was Monday during the day. I thought, here's trouble, because I noticed that Kirk Cousins was being interviewed both by Dan Patrick and Jim Rome.
Kirk Cousins joins me. Kirk, what's up? How are you?
I'm doing well. It's an honor to be back in the jungle.
You know, I thought the same thing.
I said, oh my God.
Look out.
Watch out. They're getting a little full. And I don't mean this critically of Kirk Cousins, but, you know, if there is a same old Spartans that scares me that's coming back, it's getting too much full of themselves after a big victory.
Right, and a lot of the same old Spartans came back also on Kirk Cousins, as on typically on the road he is not delivered. He threw the ball for 86 yards in this game, and I'm not saying it's all his fault, but there's a pattern there. Great quarterback, and also what I saw, a lack of versatility, as far as being able to run out of the pocket that perhaps other quarterbacks have been able to do.
He's never going to beat you with his feet.
Right.
But okay, everyone, settle down. Okay? If you had said at the beginning of the season that Michigan State would come out of October with our schedule with a 3-1 record, everybody would have been turning cartwheels. So the fact that we're 3-1, I think we're ahead of the game. And as far as that loss goes, our two losses, that defense is still playing lights out. I mean, against Notre Dame and against Nebraska, they had 270 yards total offense. The problem was the offensive scheme and the offensive game that was called by Rauscher.
Yeah, a lot of criticism came out of that.
And I think deservedly so, because, Nebraska was basically daring State to run the whole game.
And also double covering B.J. Cunningham.
Both wideouts.
Right, and Cousins was forced to, throw the football. I got to ask you one quick question that just popped into my mind. That when you're talking about Kirk Cousins settled down, okay? What would you say if a couple years ago Keith Nichol was a starting quarterback at Michigan State? I know Kirk Cousins, three-time captain, and maybe that had something to do with the fact that he was named quarterback. I don't know. Well, what do you think? Where would Michigan State be? As great as an ambassador of college football, the ultimate perfect human being in Kirk Cousins, where do you think Michigan State football would be right now if Keith Nichol was the quarterback?
I'm reluctant to answer this, but I will. I think that Kirk Cousins has won more games with what's between his ears in terms of his adjustments at the line, that I'm perfectly fine at the decision that was made 3 years ago with him as a starting
I know, but I'm
quarterback.
talking about comparative. You're not knocking Kirk Cousins. Talk about Keith Nichol. Where would they be if he was the quarterback right now?
Well,
based on what he did at Lowell,
you would have the combination of a running and a passing threat, which you don't have with Kirk Cousins.
Which is a wonderful thing that we saw this weekend with Ohio State. Braxton Miller on that touchdown pass, the fact that he was literally teetering in the line of scrimmage, it was almost a legal pass. Those DBs dropped off. But that's the versatility of having that running quarterback.
Here is the danger that you have with that. And again, I don't want this to appear as a knock of Keith Nichol, but Keith Nichol is so naturally talented that with those type of players, they tend to force things into coverage. You know, they think their arm is going to compensate for double and triple
coverage. You really don't know
coverage.
because he really didn't have the opportunity. I saw that when I went to that spring game 3 years ago.
Oh,
3
yeah.
years
I mean,
ago?
yeah, when they
Remember
just-
that was an absolute draw?
Yeah.
Okay?
Total yardage.
Total
Absolutely.
yards. I mean, it was ditto, okay? That's the only thing I have based on Keith Nickel. And I saw Kirk Cousins at that spring game.
Right.
Okay? I had nothing better to do that day than go to a Michigan State spring game. And based on that, it's like, wow.
Okay, now I'll tell you what I think the biggest problem is, what needs to be fixed for Michigan State as it relates to this offense. Get the tight end involved in the
Oh, I've
passing
said that
game.
all along. You got two good ones.
I mean, we've got three good
but
ones.
Deion Sims, beautiful. He had a pass right in his hands.
Well,
dropped it.
yeah, but throw it back to him. Give him
Right.
confidence, and don't always use the sidelines. You run that. There's two plays that I was saying. Where is the seam pass to the tight end, and where compliments to Michigan is the waggle pass.
Right.
I mean,
Play
Michigan.
action. Right.
Michigan made. I mean, almost the 1990s were defined by
Right.
the Michigan waggle pass.
Jeremy Tooman. Yep.
Well, not just Tooman. I mean, I could go down and name.
Well, they had wideouts that did the same thing too.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, and that is going to be your defense against that Nebraska scheme.
Well, Nebraska did everything but I wanted Michigan to. You recall back a few weeks ago, put pressure on Kirk Cousins, and all of a sudden you're going to change the dynamics of the game. The Huskers did that, and they end up winning 24-3. Back after this, Bitter Rivals with Ted and Tom.
It's good, you know, sometimes you get your little brother excited when you're playing basketball and stuff, let him get the lead, and then you just come back and take it back.
Welcome back, Bitter Rivals, Ted and Tom. We're going to start talking about Michigan now after that big homecoming went by. Speaking of homecoming, see my homecoming garb that I wore this weekend. Anyway, 36-14, the Wolverines knock off the Boilermakers. Boilers started out 7-0, and I'm sure Sparty fans, they go, oh, God, here they go again. Here comes Michigan, going to lay an egg. But no, they came back, started running the football. I said in last week's Blue Belly blog, run the football. Go back to the old style of Michigan football, and not just, you know, Denard Robinson running the football, but Fitz Toussaint did a great job. And I think that that's what it's going to take to get Michigan football back. Maybe not this year, next year, the style that we're used to watching play.
Let me say this about Michigan football. In the last 2 weeks, I think that the Brady Hoke and his players have done an outstanding job of regrouping after a very tough loss, keeping their mouth shut, and letting their words be demonstrated on the playing field.
Right.
Versus the fan base, which I think they
these-
were ridiculous.
Well, absolutely, but that's what fans come from. They're fanatic. That's where the word comes from. But it was definitely a good win, and it really makes the Big Ten race now wide open in terms of the legends.
Well, you know,
division.
that's a great point, Tom. And what I think the next point of discussion should be is, what do we have left? What do each of the contenders in the Legends division have remaining? Because I think it's been referred to, and I agree. Michigan State had the toughest path up to now.
Oh, absolutely.
And to be sitting there where they are,
They're in the best shape.
with that remaining schedule, you know, you've got Minnesota at home, albeit they had a good win against.
Okay, don't even go there. I mean, that's
Well, they did. They had a good win
I know, but
against
it's
Iowa,
30
and
I mean,
thank you. And thank you, by the way, because that puts Iowa behind the 8 ball. But then after that, at Iowa, that's their tough one. That's
Right.
that's the
the only
what I see
tough
as the
one.
the road bump. Indiana, W.
Right.
And at Northwestern, they should win. It's at Northwestern.
It's not a huge home field advantage for the Cats.
Yeah, and I think there's going to be, including myself,
Right.
a really good
Oh,
Michigan
it's the
State
way it always-
contingent.
it's the way it always
Well, and it's also Thanksgiving weekend, so you got a 4-day weekend.
There you go.
We're going to make a
Do a little second city,
Oh,
the whole
yeah,
bit. Okay.
absolutely.
In contrast to that, and I wish it wasn't this case, the Wolverines have an extremely difficult challenge. Winning at Niall Kinnick Stadium is a huge challenge, no matter what kind of team they're. Even though they lost in Minnesota, they'll just steam up Iowa even more. At Illinois just due. They've had such bad luck lately. They played Penn State pretty tough on the road. They're due to deliver a big W.
They're Jekyll and Hyde.
Absolutely, weird team. And then you got Nebraska with their defense playing the best defense in the Big Ten. And then you got Ohio State's got some of these kids back that were suspended, and they're starting to rev up, and they're seeing actually a second life here that they have a shot to go to Indy.
Okay, now comparing those 4 games, I'm saying Michigan State's going to run the table. Tom?
I would say Michigan State will run the table. And I think that Michigan, well, there's my heart and there's my brain. My heart wants 3, or my heart's thinking 3 out of the 4, but I'm thinking it could be probably 2.
Possibly 1.
It could be 0 to be, or it could be 4. That's just the thing about Michigan.
Yeah, my guess is they're going to go through that gauntlet 2-2.
Yeah, but I don't even know how to break it down because I don't know if they're going to lose the last 2 at home. I think they could beat Nebraska. The Big Ten, Ted. I swear, I watch football all weekend long. I watch Pac-10. I watch SEC. I watch the Houston Cougars. Conference USA.
Jeez.
I mean, they're fun to watch. You have nothing better to do for 3 hours. Watch the Cougars play. Okay. But I don't
believe me. You better. That's the bottom of the.
I don't think the Big Ten is very good compared to other years. They don't have a national championship caliber team.
Yeah, but you
they
say
got balance.
That every time Michigan or Ohio State are down, and in this case, Ohio State is down, people say, well, the Big Ten's down as a conference.
Well, I don't say that. I mean, some years they do it's how you do in non-conference play. There's the only way to litmus test this thing. How'd you do in non-conference? Where's the quality win for the? I mean, Ohio State lost to Miami of Florida.
Right.
Okay. Where's the quality win? The other teams, Michigan beat Notre Dame. I mean, Notre Dame got beat by SC. Who'd Michigan State beat?
SC should have won that game.
But USC barely beat Minnesota. I mean, you can start carving things away. Where's the quality win in the Big Ten? There's really not because they didn't play. So what you have to do, you got to wait for the bowl games. Then you get your true test of how good it is. So we really have to wait. But as it stands right now, I think it's probably the 3rd best.
I call
the Big 12
I call
is
it
better.
the Barry Alvarez syndrome, where so many people they look at what Alvarez did and how he built that program and how he stacked up that non-conference schedule, and they said, why beat ourselves up? We'll throw in, of the 4 non-conference, we'll throw in a Notre Dame because it's a traditional rivalry. We'll throw in a Miami of Florida, because it's a sexy game. Next year, you got Michigan, Alabama.
And you got Boise State, Michigan State.
Yeah, so I think, there is some backlash to that, but I think you get what you get because they're looking at, here's Wisconsin year in, year out going to a pretty good bowl game because they're running the table until they crap the bed on the road.
Well, but you know what?
Against a tough competition.
Yeah, in Wisconsin, you talk about a hard luck team. My God, that's a whole other segment. But they should have they could have easily beat TCU in the Rose Bowl last year. Yeah. Wisconsin's not too bad.
But they were ranked higher. They should have.
Yeah, you're right. Anyway, but we'll see what's going to happen. But I think Nebraska's in the driver's seat right now, and Michigan State's right there. Michigan is a distant 3rd on that. So we'll break it down further. You're listening to Bitter Rivals with Ted and Tom.
They need to check themselves sometimes. But just remember, pride comes before the fall.
Anything specific?
Just here, pride comes before the fall.
And welcome back to Bitter Rivals with Ted and Tom. Hey, Tom, I want to talk about the so-called national experts and contrast that with some of the regional coverage that we're getting both on ESPN and the Big Ten Network. In particular, I want to talk about the team that covered the game against Michigan State and Nebraska last weekend, Dan Paschke, Chris Spielman, and Urban Meyer. That is the most succinct and knowledgeable team of broadcasters you would ever wish for with your team. Their breakdown of what was going on in that game was spot on. Spielman, every time he talks, listen because he knows what he's talking about. And Urban Meyer, pray to God he stays in the
Well, he's not.
booth.
He's going to be coaching Ohio State next year. So, I mean, it's a one and done thing, what you're seeing, this magnetic.
Well, that's a shame because, that trio, someone's got to do play-by-play, and I think Dan Paschke does a good job of it. Mm-hmm. But, from my point of view, I would just let Spielman and Urban Meyer.
They're very good. And I'm a big guy in terms of chemistry. of the play-by-play and the analysts, and that's where I think that Brad Nessler and Todd Blackledge are just they have a tremendous timing of it, which I marvel at.
Yeah.
And Brad Nessler, what I'd give for that voice, I mean, he's unbelievable. He's been doing it he's going on 25 years now.
And he's great in the moment, you know, especially in big games and especially with big plays. I mean, they had the call for Little Giants in the Michigan State
they
Notre
did that
Dame
game. That's correct.
Which was, you know,
Manningham against Penn State in
exactly,
05. Yep.
exactly.
He's had some fortunate ones.
Now, Spielman and Urban Meyer may be drier, but in terms of the overall knowledge and understanding of the game, it is unbelievable. And I contrast that to some of the so-called national experts. I think a lot of those guys are reading from the Cliff Notes. You know, I was watching a show last week, and one of the so-called national experts said that they thought that Nebraska was going to win because Michigan State's defensive backfield was weak. Well, they based that on just watching the Wisconsin game and 2 or 3 plays that happened during the Wisconsin game. If I tell you, neither Spielman nor Urban Meyer would have made that statement because they watch film every game and not just the one game. They go back and watch multiple games, and they've seen that the Michigan State's defensive backfield's body of work this season would say it's one of the top defensive backfields in the Big Ten.
Right, right. And those two, you know, you don't see Spielman on those quote-unquote talking heads panels. I mean, he leaves it for the studio. You know,
Yeah.
and
Well, he's also got a radio show.
Yeah, he's got his radio show. That's locally in Columbus. But I mean, we've talked about this. There's so many talking heads in college football, and they all got different opinions. Multiple networks are doing it right now. You don't know what to believe, and everybody's grasping at straws or having a new angle on things. So I can kind of see how that happens.
But you can cut through, you know, who's been doing their homework and who's just working off the Cliff Notes.
Right.
And I think too much credit is given to the so-called national experts when there's some people that are doing a great work at the regional level, and in particular Chris Spielman and Urban Meyer.
Well, whether it's good or not so good, I just love college football, and this weekend was the epitome of just sitting home and watch that USC-Stanford game. I didn't want that game to end. And,
it almost didn't.
Yeah, and Ohio State and Wisconsin. How bad do you feel for Brett Bielema twice in a
Not
row
at all.
now?
I don't feel bad.
You don't.
Not at all.
disdain,
No. I mean, see, he sat there, ran up the score last season. He up until the Michigan State game, he'd just been running up the score on players. They said last year's defeat against Michigan State was they stubbed their toe. Yeah, I just don't like the guy.
Well, before we close this segment, I got a question to ask about, though. When you're talking about Wisconsin, Ohio State, who would you rather have Michigan State play if they get to Indy? Because there's payback ammunition going that direction towards your school.
There's a lot of momentum on Ohio State's side right now.
No, they got their players back.
They have their players back, and the other thing is Braxton Miller is getting comfortable in his skin right now. I think early part of the season, he was still feeling his way around, and he made some freshman mistakes. I think he's getting more comfortable, and he's gaining confidence. I don't know. It's a toss-up.
Well, I think it's going to be problematic no matter who they play for Michigan State. If they get to Pasadena for the first time since the '87 season, they will definitely have earned it.
I think they've already earned it.
Well, we'll see. They still got to get to the championship. They got to win the Big Ten championship.
But they've gone through the tough part of their schedule.
But they got to win that Big Ten championship.
They have to win the games they're supposed to win.
They got to win on December 3rd. That's the question, and I don't think they can get it done. Better Rivals, Ted and Tom, back in.
This might sound arrogant, and if it is, it is. We're Michigan.
I'm telling them it's not over. It's just starting. It's not over. It'll never be over here.
Welcome back. Our final segment of this week's Bitter Rivals with Ted and Tom. I want to talk briefly. I got a little email from one of our fan base being taken back by the fact I refer to the Spartans as Sparty, and
I don't like it.
And I countered back to this person. Oh yeah, well, how would you like to be on the receiving end of what Michigan fans are called scum versus Sparty.
All right.
Scum is a little bit more abrasive than Sparty.
What
I think
about
Sparty is affectionate?
What about the Wolverines? Do you prefer that?
Well, I mean, Sparty is your mascot. What's your mascot?
Our mascot is Sparty, but I will.
Well, then why is that negative?
I will draw a line of distinction because the difference is that you're not called scum on national TV by the analysts and the people covering the games. We're constantly referred to in highlight films and
Reese
discussions
Davis
about
right.
Michigan State as Sparties, the Sparty or Sparties. Now he also does it with Wisconsin.
With Bucky.
Bucky Badger.
Right.
So he's somewhat consistent.
And
in
Brutus
that,
a little
but
bit with Ohio
it's
State.
like you're minimalizing.
The thing about it is with Michigan,
the team as the Spartans, our mascot is Sparty. There's a difference.
The mascot.
Now,
I mean, you're branding the mascot, which is in the top 16 of mascots. I don't see that. I don't understand your sensitivity about Sparty. I do think this though. I think it goes back to that Notre Dame Michigan State game and the rain. When they gagged it away and everything, and Herb Street and Desmond looked at each other snickering. Well, same old Sparty.
It was worse than that.
Yeah. Anyway, I think that's where it came from.
This is what makes Michigan State Michigan State.
That's so
I mean,
Sparty.
it was condescending, and well, if you want to get into it, I think there's a distinct Michigan bias within ESPN. I think to call Desmond Howard an analyst is a joke.
Oh,
you might as well
here.
give the guy maize and blue pom-poms and a cheerleading skirt because he's nothing less than an adjunct SID to the University of Michigan.
You're just bitter because you don't on that panel. You don't see any Spartans.
Has he picked against Michigan all season?
I haven't seen game day.
No, absolutely not.
I like Desmond.
And
I think he does a good job.
Can he say anything good about Michigan State? No.
I don't know. Just give it up.
Yeah, you like it when there's a positive bias towards Michigan State.
No, he said so. He picked Michigan State to win this week.
Well, that was the problem right there.
And against Nebraska, for God's sake. So don't say he's just against Michigan State. Anyway, let's talk about next week. Michigan goes to Iowa, Niall Kinnick Stadium. Oh my God, that's going to be a tough game for the Wolverines. You got to learn to win on the road. The Big Ten, as I said before earlier in the show, is not that good of a conference. They don't have these, dynamite teams that can go on the road and just win because they're that good, like the Big 12 has and the SEC has.
Well, if I was Greg Madison, I'd sit down with that Minnesota-Iowa game film and just break that down because Minnesota showed the template on how to beat Iowa's defense with a run-pass-oriented quarterback and team.
In contrast, it's funny, Michigan State play the two teams that played in that game, that 22-21 victory for the Gophers up in Minneapolis. Any concerns about a hangover off this loss in Nebraska?
I don't think there's any way that Minnesota can pull it off 2 weeks in a row, especially on the road. I mean, Minnesota notoriously will spring up one time a season and bite some front runner and knock them off their ledge.
Right.
They've done that.
Right.
And coming into Michigan State, Spartan Stadium for a noon kickoff, there's no chance.
Michigan State is a very home team this year.
Well,
look what they've done on the road.
It's college football probably gives you the greatest home field advantage of any sport.
And I think it's not so much.
That's why Michigan would never travel for 60 years.
That's why they have 8 home games. Next year they only have 6. They only have 6 home games next year. They have a neutral game with Alabama down at Cowboy Stadium.
Right.
That'll be fun, playing Alabama.
Oh, that's going to be a 50-50
But let's not get ahead of ourselves. And thanks for tuning in to Bitter Rivals with Ted and Tom. We'll see you next week.
Have a good week.
Rivalry has gone. It's gone, well, frankly, to the billboards. Check out what we found out last night. Near the Frandor Shopping Center in East Lansing, a digital billboard ripping Michigan. Just every way you can, minutes after the game. It's sponsored by Bitter Rivals, who started a website called MichiganIsOurLittleSister.com. There are 8 different images, and they will be up all week. In Frandor and one on I-96, Bitter Rivals paid a few $1,000s for those, and you can get all sorts of mementos if you go there. If you're really into the little sister thing and you really want to rub it into your Michigan fan,
All right.
they got it covered.
Well,